The president delivered a simple message at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland Friday. America is open for business. And when the U.S. prospers, the president said, the rest of the world does too.
I believe in America. As president of the United States, I will always put America first, just like the leaders of other countries should put their country first also. But America first does not mean America alone. When the United States grows, so does the world.
Economic advisor to former Presidents Bill Clinton and Barack Obama, Gene Sperling, also was in Davos. He gave us his take on the speech.
He noted that if America does well, others might do better, but he didn't really note that by us working together on things like the Paris Treaty, we can all be better. And I think what most presidents find is that sometime during their presidency, they need other countries, militarily, economically, and it pays off to have a spirit of working together. And I think that for a lot of leaders, a lot of people in different countries, they still look at Donald Trump as somebody who sees the world as a zero-sum game where any benefit for one country is at the expense of another.
And now with yet another perspective is economist and University of Maryland professor Peter Morici in Washington. Peter, thanks for being with us. What did you make of the president's speech?
Well, I heard it somewhat differently than Gene. I mean, what President Trump is trying to say to the world is that things like trade need to be reciprocal. You want to export more? Well, so do we. We can't bear the huge trade deficit that we have. You want our investment? Fine. We want your investment as well. Unfortunately, to make these kinds of things work, Gene is right. You have to have cooperation. And by taking such a pugnacious approach in his rhetoric so often, and some of the obtuse positions he takes, for example, most importantly on global warming. I mean, I understand conservatives' ambivalence about the Paris Accord. It wasn't the best deal for America at all. But to just say global warming really isn't a problem, it makes it very, very difficult for him to go to a place like that is so orthodox and so mainstream as Davos, those leaders, and make a lot of progress and get a favorable review.
Yeah, well, we will get to the issue of climate change in just a moment, but I want to ask you first, more broadly, how do you think his speech was received by all the world leaders in that room?
I think it was only moderately well received. I think they were glad to see him there and that he's engaging with them, but I frankly think they would have preferred to have a different personality to engage with. They're very suspicious of the notion of the phrase "America first," because you can say Germany should put America first, but the United States is such a heavyweight still, and will remain to be for a very long time, that, you know, if we're not talking about China, there's no one that really can bargain with the United States on a bilateral basis effectively. So I think that that's some of the ambivalence, and I think, frankly, you know, Donald's not that likable a guy.
So some of that came across. All right, well, let's get to climate change then. As you pointed out, a big topic of discussion, a lot of interest in climate change at Davos. It was mentioned in speeches by French President Macron, German Chancellor Merkel, Indian Prime Minister Modi, but the President of the United States made no mention of it. How do you think that in particular was received?
Well, I think he was being very wise, given his position that climate change isn't a problem, not to mention it, because he was probably the only person at Davos, other than his immediate aides, that believes that position, or at least would defend it. The real problem with the Paris Accord is it expected so much of the United States and so little of China. And that actually makes global warming worse, because if we have a structure that permits jobs to move from the United States to China in manufacturing, CO2 emissions actually go up because our industries are cleaner. But he never articulates it in those terms. Instead, he denies it. And, you know, not very far away from Davos, there are glaciers that are disappearing. Go to Norway, the glaciers are disappearing. It's quite apparent that global warming is an issue. And so if he's going to take this climate change denial position, he's much better off just not talking about it at all.
which I guess is the tack that he took there. You're absolutely right. Now, also on Friday, the Commerce Department reported the U.S. economy grew 2.6% in the fourth quarter. So how have President Trump's policies impacted the country's economic growth? And could we see it grow even more in 2018?
I think they're doing a fairly good job on the economy. Less trade. The tax cut is going to be very beneficial, and it's focused exactly where it needs to be, on investment, because investment gives you multiplier effects. You know, if you encourage people to buy new computers and more artificial intelligence and so forth, not only do you get the stimulus spending, but you get increased productivity that pays dividends year after year after year. On regulation, a lot's been made of him throwing the book out the window. They're really not. What they're trying to do is to right-size regulation, and I think businesses picked up on that. You know, for example, the regulations with regard to community lending. They're not throwing the book out the window for the banks, but both the bankers and the community activists are not happy with those regulations. They're too bureaucratic, and both sides want to have a better deal. So I think they're doing a good job there, and I think this has helped foster more growth. I think we look forward for the next couple of years to better growth than we had during the economic recovery when President Obama was president. Now, also, in fairness to Mr. Obama, the economy really did take a hard shot with the financial crisis, and recovering from that was pretty hard. And now we're benefiting from the fact that consumers are better off, labor markets are stronger, and so forth.
Right, and the recovery had started at the end of Obama's term, so.
Well, actually, the recovery started 7 years ago, but the economy really did pick up steam during Donald Trump's years. The question is, how much of it is attributable to the Obama legacy and how much is Mr. Trump? And I would say that, you know, both sides are taking too much credit, that this is really a joint venture.
Now, you know, going back to Davos, the president was there largely, it seemed, to sort of sell America as a place to invest. Hey, guys, you know, come put your money in us. How do you think that went over with the crowd? Do you think you saw a lot of people there, a lot of world leaders who said, hey, you know what, now with fewer regulations, maybe I will invest in the U.S.?
You know, those of us who write about politics and write columns as I do like to focus on what world leaders think. They don't matter when it comes to this. What matters is what companies think. And the companies liked what they heard, because they're the ones that make investment decisions. You know, President Macron doesn't decide whether Peugeot puts a factory in the United States. It's Peugeot that decides. And the reports that we're getting are companies are making decisions to put factories in the United States and facilities in the United States where a year ago they would not have. That's a hard reality that's coming down very well, and I think we saw that in Davos, and that was a good thing. So that score one, you know, you take one away from him on climate change, but you got to score one for him on investment.
Sure. No, that's definitely good economic news. All right, Peter Morici, thank you for your insight.
Thank you for having me.